have seen so far, the people that got the FOMO effect last year, that's been a tiny little wave. What's yet to come is a tsunami.
Hi, I'm Lori Kong. I'm here with TODA Network, Toufi Salava, CEO, and Dan Tolliver, CTO of TODA Network. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about how you two met.
We met through a development community. At the time, I've had hired a phenomenal VP engineering out of Tel Aviv University, and he was in Toronto, and he had met Dan through the development community, and thought that the two of us should meet, given our AI background and a lot of crypto and so on and so forth. So we met, and we started working on a lot of problems that existed in the current space at the time, where everybody is believing in the promises of the blockchain but not delivering. We thought that somebody would work on a solution, given that that didn't happen. And we were working on it, and we had a lot of developers working with us. I have a lot of eureka moments that I keep calling Dan in the middle of the night, and one of them, we put a placeholder for it to be TODA for the name of the TODA, and this became protocol that then became a company. And when we were sitting with our third co-founder, Todd Gebhardt, who was prior to that the vice chair of Intel Security, and he said, you know what, guys, not only protocol you can make out of this, you can make a company. So we started building a company, and that company monetizes on the delta between what we know and the rest of the world don't know, but they're still skeptical. So we don't have any incentive to convince people that TODA works. We can continue working. We're the opposite of many other people that they want to prove that something works, but yet they don't have anything that works. Instead, we just build things that work, and we don't have to prove it to anybody. We just keep piling up more and more companies. We're currently have about 19 projects building on TODA. From those, we have about 13 of them. They're building joint ventures or strategic alliances or something like that with us. And we have this thing, we would only make money if our partner would make money. And our partner would only make money if the users would see benefit. So yeah, we're not interested in any things that can just be created for a certain period of time to give a certain group benefit. And we feel that we don't only get along from the perspective, from technical perspective, but it's also from philosophical, ethical, and so on and so forth. So that's how we met, and that's how we're here. So I know you asked how we met, but I can't kind of give you the long things. Let Dan talk about his version, because I usually introduce him as the rocket scientist in-house, because he used to work for NASA.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Dan, you actually worked for NASA.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Tell me a little about that.
It was my first job out of college, actually. So I worked at what's called a NASA DAC, a Distributed Active Archive Center. We were collecting satellite imaging data from Earth-observing satellites operating in the radar range. So it's something called synthetic aperture radar. The satellite flies around, it sends a pulse of radar energy down, it hits the ground, bounces back up to the satellite, and if you do some careful calculations, you can actually, in a way, think of the distance that the satellite has traveled as the length of its antenna. So between the time it sends a pulse and receives the pulse, hence synthetic aperture, because what you're doing is a whole bunch of calculations in order to be able to pretend that you have this aperture or antenna that you don't really have. It's synthetic. So this gives you the ability to get fairly good spatial resolution on the imaging that you're doing of the Earth. But the real fancy part comes in when you compare two of these images. You can use something called interferometry to get not only meter level spatial resolution, but also centimeter level elevation and potentially millimeter level differences in how ice or the ground has shifted. So we used this for a variety of purposes. It was a lot of fun.
So you guys met in Silicon Valley then?
In Toronto.
In Toronto?
In Toronto, yeah. So we've always had development teams in Toronto. Toronto is phenomenal for developers. We currently have one of our joint ventures, TODA-T Financial, also started in Toronto, and they have just got one huge office, 35 seats in Toronto, and we still have another office in Toronto ourselves. So, which is very close to the Bitcoin Bay. Actually, I keep every time I come to Toronto, I run into them, and that's the thing, that they think that I'm here all the time. And the folks in Bitcoin Center in Korea, they think I'm there all the time, and in Silicon Valley, they think I'm there all the time, whether it is Palo Alto or San Francisco. So we're often in those three different places.
So I hear you do travel quite a bit to Korea, to Silicon Valley.
This is a rare moment having Toufi in Toronto. He got here like 2 days ago.
Yesterday morning,
and he leaves in another day or two. So we're trying to pack in as much time as we can while he's here.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So TODA Network, though, the company has formed very early on this year, you were mentioning.
January 18th, 2018 is the first time we did anything seriously to the actual TODA network as a company by injecting capital into it, and started building the ecosystem around the company. And again, like I said, we don't have any trick like a token or whatnot, and none of that. What we have is strictly benefiting from the delta of what we know the rest of the world don't know, which is legit in every single nation on the planet. Whether you call a lawyer or an engineer, they also monetizing what they know and you don't know. So that's what we're monetizing on as a company. And
so what I understand TODA Network is essentially TODA Network is the company and TODA Protocol is the product, so to speak,
correct,
right?
Correct.
And what was explained to me is
product. The protocol. We have TODA Network platform is a product.
Thank you for that clarification.
So the protocol, you think of the protocol like HTTP is a protocol. Does anybody own HTTP? The answer is no. TCP/IP is a protocol. Nobody owns it. Now here's something that is extremely important for all listeners. We've said it a couple of years ago when we were working on a protocol that in the very first version, moving to the second version, which is right now in V2, that we're literally modifying TCP/IP.
Oh,
okay?
Wow.
And that modification of TCP/IP in V2 is basically modifying the network packet. Now, since then, there's over 50 companies who went with ICOs, calling themselves a TCP/IP of blockchain, whatnot.
Okay.
Not a single one of them they're accurate. Okay, they're actually, if anything, I'm not necessarily saying that they're scams, but you can bring any of their development team, any of their authors on stage live, and we can explain why they're trying to use that notion just because they want to raise money or whatnot, because it sounded really good for them or their investors. We're not trying to sound good. We're actually doing work. The work that we're doing is a modification of TCP/IP that enable Homo sapiens to not only transmit information over TCP/IP, because you already can do that, and we've done that over 40 years now, to literally transmit value over those packets and manage the value on the packet level. So that can introduce a lot of efficiency and can prevent from a lot of attack vectors, which we can discuss later on. That it's, and here's one thing that I'm going to say, and you said it a couple months ago, so chances are if anybody is going to copy this, they're going to like it, and you'll see a lot of people are going to copy it, but they're not going to understand it, which is a good thing. So something that we have in the actual TODA network, that it's the constant that we're relying on is universal constant, which is the speed of light. Nothing can go faster than the speed of light according to the laws of physics. So if somebody is in Paris and using their devices and they're being part of the network, someone in Tokyo is trying to steal that mining away from them, they have to have a faster than the speed of light way of communicating with folks around in Paris, otherwise they cannot. How do we do this? We're not necessarily going to get into the details, but I can tell you with certainty that it's in a fully decentralized setting. It's not that they tell us. We don't exist in the TODA protocol. The TODA protocol, we give it to the world, and then the world will run on it. We exist in the TODA network platform, which is the company, and this is where we partner with folks to enable them on TODA, and other people they can build directly on TODA if they know how to.
Yeah, and sorry, just to really drive home the answer to that question, TODA is necessary for us to build businesses and applications on top of TODA, in the same way that the web, HTTP, was necessary for web application companies to build those web applications. So TODA is definitely not the product. We don't actually make any money from TODA. We have, like, neither of us profit when people use TODA. There's no direct connection at all. And if there was, that would be a weakness in the protocol. If people are profiting off of the use of the protocol, that's a weakness in the protocol. You could make the protocol more efficient by getting rid of that. So we've made it as efficient as we can so that we can build efficient businesses on top of it.
Which is important, what Dan is mentioning. It's not being noticed by a lot of people, because many people, when they're building, for example, dApps on Ethereum or their entire solution, what they're not being told, and you'd be shocked, you'd be talking to people, they are phenomenal geniuses, and I respect them, because from their perspective, I mean, it's more like if they're a race car driver, they don't necessarily need to be mechanics, right? So they assume or they believe that what they're seeing or what they're being told is correct. But fees and costs are not the same. So when you see the fees in Ethereum, for example, the gas price is expressed in gas, you run the smart contract, it costs 20 cents. And
now we're getting into operational costs that in order to even run technology.
So what's the real cost is about 50 times more than that. And you don't have to believe me, you don't have to believe anything that we say, you don't have to trust us, you can verify every single thing that we say. And you can challenge us if we said anything that is not accurate. Anything about the existing world, we say it with 100% accuracy. Anything that we say about the future is our beliefs. With the people that aligned our beliefs, they can join us in our win. If they're not, they can wait to be disrupted. But basically, with the Ethereum today, that's a huge problem that is impacting every single company that's building on Ethereum, because what's happening with the cost is not going to come out of nowhere. It's going to come from somewhere. There is no escape from the cost. So if you, for example, you have a company with 10 million users, which is pretty much all the users on Ethereum globally plus, and you've been running since January 1st, you effectively, one way or another, you and your users, you've paid $3.3 billion.
And that is broken down into the amount of hardware, energy, time, resources.
So that's leakage from your users to a different group that is called miners. And now they're hurt as well. All miners, they also believed in that same thing, that it's like, hey, let's go set up this infrastructure and become miners, so because they're opportunists, which is totally cool, but they're getting hurt big time by this, because they have to pay for infrastructure and they have to pay for resources and so on and so forth, and that keeps leaking from them as well. What we're currently working with some miners that we can't work with all miners. We're just a couple of them that we've got to build a relationship with them, is that to transition them from the chaos that they're in into the future, into adding true value to people by building bridges for each and every one of the companies they're trying to get from where they are now to fully distributed in decentralized setting, where in 6 months to a year in each and every project they will cease to exist because it ends up in people's hands. TODA doesn't give it to a different group of miners, but there's an opportunity for existing miners to bridge people onto the other one. And the few miners we're talking to, they're seeing that opportunity and they're pouncing on it to help us bring those communities onward.
So from what I understand, there's the bottom layer, which is the TCP/IP, and then this is where the zero layer is where the TODA protocol sits. And the concept is then any of the crypto or blockchain technology would sit on top of the TODA protocol.
Every single blockchain today sits on TCP/IP. There's no single blockchain that is sitting on air. They're all sitting on TCP/IP. What we have done with TODA v2 is a modification of TCP/IP, so folks, they have an additional option to build their blockchain. Whether existing folks, they do it or not, we're not necessarily too concerned about the existing ones. What we're concerned about is the remaining 99.8% of the planet there haven't been touched by the current blockchain. The entire blockchain revolution, if you were to call it, is still less than 0.2% global penetration. Some people, they call it adoption, some people call it whatever it is. Any standards is less than 0.2% if you count the money, if you count the people, if you count the usage, and so on and so forth. Less than 0.2%. That's how tiny that thing is. So for folks that they believe that this is a revolution, as of yet, they're wrong. But if they believe that they want to make a revolution, they are right, because they can. And TODA is here to enable them to make the true revolution.
And when you say they can, this is where you talk about the sexy, the 5
That's
core
right.
values of security, efficiency, confidentiality, scalability, and interoperability. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because those are key
Absolutely.
issues in blockchain right now.
100%. So, I speak in a lot of events, and one of the events I was speaking at in St. Petersburg. It's a yearly event, over 20,000 group of scientists, and at the time we decided to also give something to the world for folks to measure their blockchains. This is not for us, it's just like for the world to measure. How sexy is your blockchain? And sexy here is spelled S-E-C-S-I. If your blockchain, it starts with security. If it's not security, nobody wants to use it. So before folks they come and tell me about their scalability, or they tell the world about scalability, if it's not truly secure, they don't really need to exist. And decentralization is a security model. So when we see centralized attempts to solve scalability, but yet they can attack it from within because they have the largest stake, or they have the computing power, whatever what they have, that they could attack it themselves, that's not revolutionary. That existed. We've had databases that can outperform what they're claiming anyways. And databases, they were so secured, but also behind the firewall. They could attack it themselves. So in this specific instance, when we see folks aiming for scalability, we'd like to remind folks, you gotta start with security, okay? Once you have security, the next thing you gotta focus on is efficiency, because if you have something that's super secure, but it's not efficient, for example, if I wanna give you piles of cash, and it's more efficient to give you the cash, you know, literally like carrying it and giving it to you, rather than going on my phone and sending it to you, if this is more efficient, then I'm going to use it that way. Because I know it's secure, I can take it, I can take the money and give it to you, right? So we've got the security. The second is efficiency. If it's not efficient, it will not be successful, no matter what claims folks would have. It has to have efficiency. So again, before we get to scalability, it has to be efficient. The third one, we put it to be confidentiality, and we didn't necessarily put privacy, because privacy opens up all kind of debates. People that are willing to forego their privacy or whatnot, which is something that is close and dear to my heart and to Dan's as well. That privacy is an element of our liberty, and people, they shouldn't forego it. But look, I mean, this can be subjective. Some people may want to let go of their privacy, but all businesses cannot run without confidentiality. Like I said, everything that I'm saying you can verify. You can go and check and see. All businesses can run without confidentiality, and you know the answer is not. So we have to have confidentiality by design, otherwise it's going to end up impacting the previous one, the efficiency. If it doesn't exist and you want to add it later, oh, you know what, it's not confidential now, we'll take care of it later. Well, guess what? Later it's going to impact the previous one. So you have to have those three. Once you have them, then you can say, okay, now we need to go for scalability. If you don't have any one of those three, don't worry about scalability, because you don't even need to scale. Okay? So an example to that, for example, EOS, they claim they have more scalability than Ethereum. But the question is, could Amazon build a database better than EOS with more security? And the majority of true technical people in security, the answer is yes, they can. So the battle is between Amazon and EOS. This is not for me. I mean, Microsoft and EOS. Microsoft can build better security than EOS. Google and EOS, they can build better security than EOS. So why do EOS exist, and why do they call themselves the Ethereum killer? In fact, in January, we'll be announcing something that's called the killer of all Ethereum killers. Not necessarily that we're taking stand by Ethereum because we love Ethereum, whatnot. It's not about that. It's about rescuing the community. And it's called Ethereum on TODA. So that's another thing we'll be announcing in January. I won't talk much about that. It's EOT. And we're calling Ethereum on TODA EOT. which is the killer of all Ethereum killers, including EOS and all of those other ones that they steal from others, whether it's Cardano or whatever, you know. So if folks, they want to call that you're standing with the Ethereum folks or whatnot, it's not necessarily the Ethereum folks, it's with the community. There are thousands and thousands of investors believe in those projects and they really want to see them delivering. We want them to be successful, and that's why we want to, the first time we heard about folks who want to come and build Ethereum on TODA, we welcome them, we're giving them everything they want. The same way with Bitcoin on TODA. We're true believers in Bitcoin, the mission of Bitcoin, so Bitcoin on TODA, we want to do whatever it takes to facilitate that for folks. So that's when it comes to those four. Now, I know you asked about all five, which is the number 5, is the interoperability, and this is extremely important. What happens when you have all 5? You have the security, you have the efficiency, confidentiality, and scalability. Will you be the only blockchain on the planet? If you are, then you don't need interoperability, because within your blockchain, people can exchange without anyone in the middle because it's decentralized. But we all know the reality of this planet in the capitalist world that we live and enjoy. There are going to be a lot of other blockchains. It's open source. People, they can copy it. You know, people, they can use it. They do their own thing. So you're going to have eventually, in that 0.2%, we have 1,400 blockchains. So can you imagine how many we're going to have when we cover the 99.8% remaining? Likely to have millions of actual blockchains, not necessarily projects. Actual blockchains, people, they want to run their own blockchain. Okay. If they're not interoperable by design in peer-to-peer interoperability, then they're going to have to depend on a third party. And if you depend on a third party, we're back to square one. Because banks, inside the banks, the transactions, they go almost at no cost. It's all secured behind their firewall, whatnot. I'm just giving an example of banks, the same thing as any registry or any ledger in the world today. So interoperability that TODA provides for folks that are building on top of it is peer-to-peer. You're running on the packets that are as low as possible to the TCP/IP packets. And Ethereum is doing the same thing, and Bitcoin is doing the same thing, and every other person who's building on that top of their blockchain on that instead of TCP/IP, instead of only TCP/IP, because you still need TCP/IP for certain things like video or whatnot, or file transfer. So yeah, so then you end up you need to have all of those 5 things in order to maintain maximum decentralization without having to depend on a third party. So that's where sexy comes from. So folks need to ask themselves, how sexy is their blockchain? Yeah.